हाँ भाई, क्या हाल है? All right. The topic of my talk today is life is tragedy to those who see it, but a comedy to those who feel it. Now, a comedian is a product of a lot of adversities, a lot of miseries, depression, toxic relationships, if you may. And that whole amalgamation turns us into what we become, a clown. So, and the worst part of being a comedian is whenever you meet someone new, they always say, "Oh, you're a comedian, tell me a joke." To which I respond, "Oh, you're a government employee. Can you be unproductive for the next 40 years?" So I'm going to explain to you how I have dealt with all those things and how I was able to see the life the way I wanted to see it, to which I call postmortem of a clown. A lot of students between the age 12 and 25 write to me that they're depressed and they hate their lives and they're suicidal and whatnot, to which I laugh sometimes, like being emo. But I always tell them one thing. No matter where your life is right now, it's only a chapter. It's not the story. And it looks very legit. Thank you. You know, it looks very legit when you add your name at the bottom. It's like somebody said something. So I'm going to take you through my journey and bore you because I've entertained you a lot recently. So my parents fell in love. They fell in love in 1972, although they were married in 1971. Because that's how long it takes for a couple to fall in love when they're arranged, right? And I don't know why they call it arranged marriage. I think it should also be called, even arranged marriages are love marriages. When a boy's parents fall in love with a girl's parents. So we had a typical middle-class family. My dad had a business. He was a coal merchant, which was a big business back in the 70s. And life was good. In 1983, I was born. I was fourth of 6 kids, half a dozen siblings, because we didn't have internet back then. And my parents were bored. So we kept happening. Anyway. I was a different kid. I had different taste than other kids. As you can see, I'm playing with a doll. Or maybe it's a typical desi parenting where they try to instill the idea ever since you're born that one day you're going to settle with a girl we choose. So this is actually brainwashing happening right there. I was always inquisitive. I never succumbed to conformity. I always used to question things. Why does this happen? What purpose does it serve? When my kindergarten teacher said, the wheels on the bus go round, 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 I said, is it first law of motion or second? There's been numerous studies around the world where they tell that whatever you teach your kid during the first 5 years, that shapes their personality. And I remember my mom always taught me this one thing. Every night before I sleep, she would say, "अपने लिए तो सभी जीते हैं जहां में है जिंदगी का मकसद औरों के काम आना." Which, when I turned 16, I turned it into है जिंदगी का मकसद औरों के काम आना. And well. I was a good student, it goes without saying. I've earned various commendations. Here's me receiving an award, definitely not for my fashion sense. So, things were good, things were working out. Until one day, this phase of my life is what I call rebirth, where I learned something new about life. I remember one night, my dad came back from work and he was very upset, and I was eavesdropping because I'm a desi kid. So my dad was telling my mom, and it was during mid-90s, he said the gas company is expanding exponentially and we might end up losing our coal business because it's irrelevant technology now. Now here's the thing. At that age, I learned that problems and worries are inevitable. You're always going to have them in your life. Like when you grow up, you graduate, get married, have kids, they get married. You'll always be around problems. The only thing you can change during a problem is your attitude towards it. And that's something I learned very early in life. I remember this one time I was in my class, and this lady from finance department of the school, she came and she asked me to step out of the class. I knew something was wrong because I was noticing every week my mom's showcase of china and silverware were diminishing, which means we were selling stuff. Her jewelry was diminishing from 3 rings, she came down to 1. So I knew something was wrong. I was taken back near the library and I was told to stand there while the principal would come and speak to me. Now I knew something was wrong and I was told to pick my stuff. The principal came and she said, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but your parents haven't been able to pay the fee for the past 6 months and we're really sorry, we can't push this further and you're going to have to go back home. And I was like, wow. More cartoons. Awesome. What could I ask for? So things happened like that. Somehow we managed through school. And then I went to high school. Now, life was okay. We were managing somehow. This is me on the left holding a bag full of books. Then there's a friend of mine. He's holding a gun. So now you can imagine what fate turned us into 12 years later. I am this, and he just became a father of a boy 2 days ago, which means the gun actually worked. Moving on. So now, after college, all of my friends moved abroad because they went to study. And I couldn't afford even a Karachi University degree. So we decided that I personally decided that I might have to step out and work and support my family. So my uncle was managing this place. It's called Rim Jim Restaurant near Disco Bakery. So he said, why don't you work for me? I said, all right, that sounds fine. And that was the learning curve of my life because that taught me to be humble and be positive. I started off as a waiter, and you may have seen how people treat waiters in our country. They're so rude. Nobody smiles at you. Nobody says thank you. Nobody says please. We lack basic mannerisms. I remember this one time, this guy, he shouted at me. He said, I don't want this brand of ketchup because the owner is non-Muslim and I don't want to support him. And I said, okay, but you're drinking cola and you're supporting the Jews, and I almost lost my job there. Anyway, the work was fine, but it wasn't paying enough. So after work, I used to go to a Hollywood bakery near Gulshan Iqbal. There was this bun kebab guy. He used to make mean bun kebabs. I loved them. This one time I saw him, this old guy, he was really struggling. He was working on his own. Like he couldn't manage the dishes and the orders, so he was like, mixing everything up. So I said to him, I see you're really struggling with work. He said, yeah, I had this kid, he was working for me, and then he just ran away. He didn't show up for a week, and I can't manage. So I said, do you need help? He said, yeah, sure, if you can find someone That would be nice. I said, I can work for you. And then he said the most fascinating line ever. He said, "Abhe pagal wagal ho gaya kya?" And I said, "I'm actually serious." He said, "You look like someone from an educated family. Why would you want to work here?" I said, "I really need the money." And no questions asked. He said, "All right, you can start tomorrow. I'll pay you 30 rupees a day and 2 ande wala burger." And I'm like, yes, that's awesome. So he was stationed near a lot of coaching centers in Goshen. And every evening, a lot of students would turn up. Now, as a kid who wanted to study but couldn't, I always made effort that I could somehow communicate to these kids that I'm not what you think, I'm one of you. So I would always talk to them in English, and they'll be surprised, wow, this ban kebab wala, he speaks English, right? And they would bring all their friends. And this is like 2001. So like we didn't have YouTube or like viral video phenomena back then. Otherwise, I was a good material. So I would help them with their calculus. I would help them with their nomenclature because I studied science. And I would tell them jokes. So before they could ask me what I am and what am I doing here, I would put up an act. I would do comedy. I would start telling jokes and roasting their friends in front of each other. And they would enjoy. And my employer was happy because I was bringing a lot of business in that area. Things were working fine until one day this doctor, he pulled over and he said, "Come here." He said, "What are you doing after work?" So I said, "Are you asking me on a date?" It was weird. He's like, "No, I want to talk to you." I said, "Okay, you can talk right now." He said, "Why are you doing this?" I was like, "Excuse me, what do you mean?" He said, "Why are you working here?" I said, "What's wrong with earning an honest money, an honest buck? I'm perfectly fine here, no problem. My friends know about it. My family doesn't know about it because they still assume I'm working longer shifts at the Rim Gym place." He said, "I like your attitude in life. You're going to go very further." I said, "Okay, can I go to the bun kebab stall right now? Because I might lose my job." Turn of events, I got a job, a decent job. I was working as a medical transcriptionist. I don't know if you guys know about the profession. It used to pay really well. But then, see, the question that occurred to me is, the whole economic system that we live in, it only teaches you to be very selfish, right? It tells you to get a degree, get a job, get married, have kids, get them married, die. And you're only thinking about yourself. You don't think about how can I impact someone else's life. So this thought always used to bother me that I'm not put in this world to go to a job that I don't like. There's more to it. And a lot of friends used to tell me that you have this thing with telling jokes, why don't you give comedy a shot? And I'm like, yeah, but I'm very awkward in front of people. But I gathered my guts. And I did my first set at T2F. I spoke to Sabine Mahmood, may she rest in peace. I called her up and I said, "I want to do stand-up. Can I perform these?" She's like, "Yeah, come over, no problem." I was very nervous, but somehow I managed 12 minutes. And it was a very good feeling, like, I'm just standing here saying things and everyone is laughing. It was very empowering. So further on, I performed at Base Rock Cafe, owned by Miss Samia Zafar, and then in Lahore, the Knowledge Factory, owned by Aisha Alam. Now, the whole pattern is all these places were owned by women. So what you see now is a product of empowered women, right? So when you invest in women and when you let them be, they do great things for your country. I'm right here as an example. So I was doing comedy in English because my target was to perform abroad and like somehow tell the world that, Pakistan is not only about terrorism and bad news, we also have a sense of humor. So that is the reason why I was doing it in English. But a friend of mine, Mr. Salman, as you can see hugging me, he said we need to reach out to more people and we need to reach out to masses. So we decided, okay, let's do something on YouTube. And the problem, again, in Pakistan, what are you going to joke about? You can't talk about politics or religion or anything. So what's left is making jokes on women. And I tell you what, in my experience, women are the best people who can take jokes. They actually laugh at all those things. So we made this video, and one of the things that was noteworthy about this experience was when I posted this video on Facebook, a friend of mine who I went to school with, topper, excellent student, he wrote to me and he said, "What are you doing with your life?" And I said, "Sorry, Dad, what did you just say?" He's like, you're treating life very non-seriously, and that's not the attitude. And I ignored him because the message my uncle taught me at that restaurant, he said, it's very easy. When someone says something to you, it's very easy to respond. But what's not easy is to just focus on your work and let your work do the talking, right? So I took that lesson very, very seriously. So when my friend confronted me on this, I didn't say anything. He even unfriended me on Facebook. 4 years later, when this event was announced, he actually reached out to me and he said, "I'm pursuing a doctorate degree from this very university. Is it possible I can meet you after the event?" And I said, "Sweet life." That's the revenge. Things weren't good in Karachi at that point in time, so I decided to pursue for employment in Dubai. And here's a nice picture of me and Burj Khalifa in the background. What you don't see is the fact that I actually went with no money, no contacts, and I actually lived with 3 taxi drivers. Nothing wrong with that, but there were a lot of bed bugs, and that was a problem. So we see like, oh, if someone's living in Dubai, oh, he must be like, cashing in, like living like a sheikh, but that's not the reality. There's a lot of sides. How many of you have been following me for more than 1 year? That's a lot of people. At any point, were you able to tell that I was actually homeless and I was living in my car for a while? Was there ever a point that you could say, okay, this guy might be living in a car? No, exactly. Because what I've learned is I cannot change my circumstances. I cannot change my problems. I made some wrong decisions. But what I can change is my attitude towards it, right? So I know I don't have a solution for my job or the money or the place where to live. But I do have one thing. I have a platform and I can make people laugh and make someone else's day better instead of mine. And that makes me happy. So that's how I used to channelize my happiness through you people. So I kept doing stand-up in Dubai and in other countries in the Middle East. Things were great. And this friend of mine, I was still doing like stuff on Facebook. He once said, "You're wasting your time on Facebook. It's not going to take you anywhere." And now he drops me to airport every weekend because I'm traveling for these events. So there's my answer to him, right? Things were happening really big. I once tweeted a joke and it caught the attention of Mr. Bilawal, and he tweeted, and then I sort of invited him to one of my shows, and he actually showed up, which was really, really random thing to happen. But then there's something happened. You see the guy second from the left, my friend Nabil, he died last December. And I couldn't take that news very well. I spent my nights crying because we hadn't properly met after college because he went abroad and then I moved and somehow we couldn't meet for a long time. There was this one thing we used to do together. We used to talk like a typical Karachiite, the Mela accent, right? And we used to rant about things, right? And we promised that we'll meet in Cape Town because he was working there and we're gonna do what we love doing, but sadly, he passed away. Now, how am I gonna change that problem into something positive? So I started ranting like this, what you see lately. I started to talk like how he liked me to talk, assuming he may be somewhere out there listening to me, ranting and doing what I do. So what we learned from this experience is that, like I said, the only thing you can change when you have a problem is your attitude towards it, right? There is no way life is not rosy. You're gonna have challenges and problems. You're gonna have to learn to face it the way, everything has humor, I'll tell you. Everything has a humor. I'll give you an example. One of those days when I was sleeping in my car, it's illegal to sleep in your car in Dubai, but you can actually fake when a cop comes. You can say, I've been driving for 200 kilometers and I cannot risk because I'm sleepy, and my home is still 200 kilometers further, right? So I was sleeping in my car in an empty parking lot, and I had timed my brain that I'm supposed to wake up every 15 minutes to switch off and on the AC because I'm supposed to not consume the entire petrol because I didn't have enough money. But one of these times I slept and I never woke up. And then when I woke up, it was broad daylight and I was really, really scared. What's gonna happen? And I looked outside and there were like 50 to 60 Indian uncles and aunties, all wearing pink t-shirts and white trousers, and they were praying to my car. I was like, what the hell is going on? Is this a dream? And I just rubbed my eyes. And I realized that that place where I was parked was their yoga space. And they probably came and saw me sleeping and they didn't want to disturb me, so they just gathered around my car and started doing yoga. And it was so funny. I woke up and I excused myself, I apologized, and I drove back. And I laughed the entire way. What are the odds of sleeping in a parking lot, waking up to tons of Indian, Uncle Sharma and Sushmita, and praying your car? And I kept laughing and laughing, not remembering why I was there in the first place, that I didn't have a home to sleep in. And I promised myself last year, I spoke to this friend of mine and I said, it's been enough of rough times, and next year I'm gonna rule. People are gonna make songs about me. And someone actually did, by the way. It was very funny. It's called Khalli Karao. It's a rap song. So I made up my mind and the twist of events, and here I am in front of you. It's been a pleasure making you laugh, and it's been a great journey. So what you can take the lesson from this entire journey is that what you see, there's like a lot of story behind every comedian or any person of any profession you meet. There's been a lot of tears and miseries and emotional roller coaster. So when you face something, you need to remember one thing. No matter where your life is right now, it's only a chapter and not your entire story. And when you face a problem, you need to man up or woman up, if you may, and look at the problem in the eye and just say two magical words. Khalli Karao. Thank you. Thank you.